Good afternoon from sunny Botswana. We call it a semi-desert, but it's been great. The past 1 week, we had a little bit of showers, and that's a country right next to South Africa. Super excited to see we have some new faces, and this is the super good thing about technology. I can see Felix, and from his surname, he's logging in from Nairobi, Kenya, right? And then I can see
Mm,
Mr. Mahamba. Mr. Mahamba logging in. I'm sure. I don't know which part of Tanzania you are. Are you in Dar es Salaam or where are you?
Mwanza, Mwanza,
Oh, you're in
Tanzania.
Mwanza.
The
Interesting.
yeah, legs on Mwanza.
Interesting. That is on the other side of the world. Pretty far. But don't ask me far from what. I just know it is so far. It's actually, I think it's you're closer to Kenya, right? Mwanza is that side close to Kisumu.
Yeah, close to the border, Sirare. Then
Yes.
you go to Kisumu.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been there several times in Kenya, Kisumu specifically.
Awesome. That is Ouma's hometown, right, Ouma? From your surname?
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
And then we have our other boss just logging in, Mr. Magaga. Good to see you. So we're just going to start shortly. I'll just say a warm welcome to our listeners who could be logging in from LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. I'll just request our speakers, just put it on mute for now. And then we'll have Doug, who likes to get things going. Remember, he's American, things just move fast. Welcome, Doug. As you get to know us in Africa, we can get into a meeting and talk about nothing for 10, 15 minutes. Then we start going like, what were we doing here? What was the agenda? So welcome. We're happy to have you. And you can kickstart our podcast. And then we'll have intros in between. Thank you.
We're so excited to be here for podcast number 9. We want to keep this light because the topic today is light, even as science helps enlighten us. So, if we could show, the subject is called Light from Suns to Sapiens. And so it's from sun to us. And for those who may not be familiar, this is your first time. Globally, we see a problem with students lacking basic science. And so these programs are to give basic science. And that's our purpose. It's part of a 10 topic program called STEM Zen. And this is number 9 on light. And so the outline is we talk about the goal and how we want to help teachers get ready to present this to their classes, but it's also for parents and just anybody that's interested in easy science. While Miss Sally, do we have the presentation?
This is so nice. Okay, please greet each other. Just give me 1 minute. I'm
No
gonna lose
worries.
my
We're
job
on
now.
page number 5 when you catch up. But the
Thank
point
you.
is during this discussion, please keep in mind, real simple, we want to have the sun, the sources of light, and then our computer and our digital devices screens. So suns, sources, and screens will be what we're talking about today. We start really simple, and then we build onto that, and we cover things very quickly. Please ask questions. When you have questions, please, let's stop right then and talk, because that's what makes this interesting. Your participation is really what this is all about. And don't worry if we talk topics that you're not familiar with. All this data is available through all the ebooks and printed books and the videos through Ms. Sally and her organization. So you can get copies of it to come back in. But in the next 50 plus minutes, we're going to go rapidly through light, Can we go to page 5, please? Perfect. So we're talking about the fusion in sun that makes light, how light bulbs and LEDs and other sources, including life, can make light, and then how RGB, red, green, and blue points on our screen, millions of them, make the lights that we see on our digital devices. So if there's no questions, let's just press right on. Today we're going to talk about the book Suns to Screens. We talk about why movies move. A lot of light there. And then, time permitting, we'll talk about not just is science have light in it that makes it so we can see our world, but science is also knowledge that helps us enlighten our lives. So that's our task today, is to go through this. Like I mentioned, there's lots of data here. Please feel free to stop us. Pause points. How do we make this? How do we communicate this to students in Africa? How can they use this to enlighten their lives? What makes light? We start with that. We all see light with the sunshine. Those of us who live in Seattle, sometimes we don't see a lot of sunshine, especially in the winter time. We get a lot of clouds here, but students can relate to the sun. They can relate to the animals that make light bulbs that are all around us in the various forms, from incandescence to fluorescence to LEDs, and we'll talk about those different types. There's lots of source data here for teachers and parents and others that are just interested to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so we'll talk some things very easy, and then we kind of poke at some of the things a little more complicated. But the sun is basically hydrogen atoms under heat and pressure that join together to make helium. So atoms with one proton become atoms with two protons, and in that process, it gives off heat and light. And then it goes from helium on down to iron, number 26. All that happens within a sun. Amazing. What we're seeing in the sky, which has been burning billions of years and will be fusion for billions more, gives us our light on Earth. And we talked last podcast that it takes 8 minutes from light in the sun to reach us. Even though light travels so fast, it takes that time because we're so far apart. But students can relate more as much to fire and what's going on in fire. And we can talk about in the process about nature. We talked about how photosynthesis makes products like wood and our fruits and vegetables, but in the process of fire, that fuel then with oxygen gives off heat and a couple of other products. But we also have light in light bulbs and LEDs, and we'll talk more about that. So we want to make sure that you have the source data that you need to understand light in its various forms. We've hinted at LEDs, right? So the original light bulbs weren't very efficient, the incandescent, and they would give off lots of heat, but that heat was wasted energy. Light emitting devices or diodes, LEDs, in the RGB, you'll hear a lot about red, green, and blue, RGB. Those three diodes then make the light that we see on our computer screens and a lot of the light bulbs now too. And we can get into how does it actually work, those that are interested at a molecular level, right? What's going on there at the semiconductor chip to actually make light. But then we take a pause and we say, what about life? Life can make light as well, but not just make light. What do we do with light, right? And how this is where it becomes personal. Light is personal. Light from the sun makes our plants. Plants capture energy. Then we eat that food and we get the energy. We see light glowing on screens and we can take selfies with light. But light beams, bounces, and bends. We see sunbeams. We see how light bounces in mirrors. But another key concept in our lives is how light bends. We see that in a prism where white light comes in and all the colors, and it splits to all the colors. Roy G. Biv is the acronym, right? You can see what that stands for later, but it's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. But in cameras and even in our smartphones, as we take pictures, light is bending and then gets captured. So light beams, bounces, and bends. When light bends, people learned, we're going to talk about how people discovered glass. And once they discovered glass, they were able to discover how to shape glass into lenses and to make glasses to help our eyes, and telescopes and microscopes. But a real simple demonstration in a class is to take, in England, they call them hand lenses, and in America, they call them magnifying glasses. But you take a hand lens and you are out there and you get some light that comes through it and you can see an image. And it's just so amazing for students to think that image is there. The camera doesn't create the image, it captures it. And you can demonstrate this so easily with a hand lens, a little bit of light, and a piece of paper. You can see it, but it's upside down, and you can talk about why is the image upside down. That's a simple demonstration we can do in our classrooms. Prisms are fascinating with a little bit of triangular. So Isaac Newton, hundreds of years ago, they used prisms in chandeliers in rich people's houses, and he noticed that triangular shaped prism, and he took that and then went to a dark room, at a pinhole light coming in, and he realized that makes light in its different color. But to do that demonstration with sunlight, and where students can hold it in their hand and then break light into the colors right there, and see how you have to adjust it to focus it. But then you take that and say, but that's how cameras work. And you go into where we used to have film that would capture the light with chemical energy, and how we use sensors now to capture our pictures, and we can take pictures with our smartphones and show the colors, and how that's actually different points of three-colored light. But why do we see color? The students in the classes we've gone to are just so fascinated. We'll have objects of different colors. We try to find RGB. Apples are a good example, or any kind of fruit. But it's fascinating when students realize that light, like from the sun, is all the colors. And as that white light shines onto an object, the object absorbs all the different wavelengths of color except for one wavelength, and that's what bounces off, and that we see the color that bounces. It's a fun subject. And then as you look at different colors and you can mix them, we see color because we see the light that bounces. But what about temperature? Obviously the sun is very hot, and we can see that. And in Seattle, we're hoping for some heat. I know you have plenty of heat there in Africa. We see fire and how you can't touch fire because it's hot. But then there's light bulbs, and incandescent light bulbs can get hot, but there are other types of light bulbs like fluorescent, and they're not hot, they're cool, even, right? And then we have the light emitting diodes that are cool, and the glow sticks. And we can talk about, there was a story coming up about life can make light. How astonishing it is that life has found a way to mix two chemicals together, luciferin and luciferase, mix those two chemicals together, and it gives off light, cool light, because it's obviously light. So we can all see all the different sources of light and their different temperatures, and talk about that and how it's all light. Please interrupt with any questions, please. Otherwise, we're just going to press on. I know this is a fire hose with lots of information, but hopefully you can see how practical this is. Students who see TVs or computer screens or even their cell phones, each picture that we see can be broken down into bits called pixels, and there's 3 subpixels of red, green, and blue. So the pictures that we see are composites, are put together with all these different points of light. And think about the computer chips, back to the lesson, the podcast where we talked about computers, the chips that it takes to take a signal with all these millions of points, up to 100 times a second, it changes, and how all that is controlled by chips that change the pixel points, that change the pictures that we see on things like our smartphones and computers. And so the concepts of light and glowing. I'm going to catch up with myself here. So again, we really try to keep this simple. We start simple and then we build on it. Remember that in the lesson about food, we talked about how photons of light come from the sun, and then they shine on leaves, and the leaves capture it in the chloroplast cells, and they capture that energy and they make our food, right? The fruits and the vegetables, and then how we eat it and we get that energy back. But how energy and matter are related, and it's part of our daily lives. And it's so easy for students, no matter how young, to realize we need food, we have to eat. And why do we need that? Remember the lesson on air, water, and food, where we talked about how it was broken down and gives our energy. So if there's no questions, I know this is fast. I think it's important that we get the whole subject covered, and then we'll come back and ask individual questions, please. We do take a pause, and how important the process of capturing the energy from the sun and turning it into food. But that's Einstein's famous equation: energy is equal to matter times the speed of light squared. We're seeing it here in photosynthesis. We're seeing it in how plants make food. Energy is captured and turned into our food. We see it right in front of us. Then we talk about the process later about how we eat it, and we break down the food back into energy. There's no questions on photosynthesis. We'll talk about suns to screens. This is so fun for students to see the sunshine of the daylight, and then to realize that we have in our hands our smartphones and our computers that have sources of light as well. And so now we're taking about how light goes from the sun to complete computer screens. Those of you who may be new to the presentation, we really like one-page summaries. And it helps us in the lesson go where we start and where we end up and what the key points are. And so we're going an overview. There is a book, an ebook, and a video called Suns to Screens that goes over this in more detail. But we start with the sun and the fusion that makes the light. But then we talk about how people throughout time have burned oil and different things in lamps to make light in our homes, right? And then there were carbon at a period of time that they take a flame and shine onto the gas flame and heat the carbon, and the carbon would give off light. Those of you who are a fan of the Batman movies, if you notice that big round light that they shine into the sky, right, to signal, hey, Batman, come help us, that's two carbon rods with flame on it. And now we use electricity as well, but heat that to burn so brightly. But electricity, and once it was invented, we are able to, with a flick of a switch, to turn on electricity to the incandescent, fluorescent, and LED light bulbs. But then what do we do with light? Well, light bends, and with cameras, we capture the light, previously on film for pictures and then movies, and now with our smartphones, electronic devices, how we capture that digitally. But we capture that because light bends onto sensors. Then we go way down to the pixels and talk about the red, green, and blue pixels. Then we take a pause and we say, but life has figured out how to make light as well, especially in the oceans where sunlight doesn't go down, doesn't penetrate the water. Life has figured out how to make light. How amazing that is. But a quick digression, they took those chemicals from the creatures that make light, and they learned how to make glow sticks with those same chemicals as they were able to manufacture those. Then we bring it home to us, and right in front of us, as we see and as we're talking from this presentation, we're going through computer screens. And how amazing it is that we don't just have black and white screens, we have color. And our eyes can see about 1 million different colors. And our computer devices are capable of that, but it all starts with controlling 3 points of light that make the many pictures that we see. And we go from the very close up of a computer screen pixel to the big picture. And that's it's an analog, or it's a lesson for us in science, where we go from the very detailed to the broad and how it impacts our lives. So, Miss Sally, if we could just take a pause and see if anybody's got any questions at this point.
Thank you, Doug. Quite informative. I just wish we had teachers like you when we were going through these lessons. I'm trying to figure out, this was primary school or Form 1, maybe still at 6, 7. Maybe this is something we went through at the age of 9, 10. Now we have our educators on the platform. Welcome, Rebecca, Britton, Felix, Sebastian again. Please let me know if you have questions, anything you'd like to say. You just unmute yourself and contribute. It can be a comment, and it can also be a question. You're most welcome. And if not, and also you can use the private messaging platform. You can text me when you have something you want to contribute. Maybe, Doug, we can keep going. Or do you want to say something?
Just, is there somebody else who wants to talk? Or I'll keep going. Please interrupt with any questions. How do we bring this home? How do we bring this concept to students, right? Because once we've done that, it opens up their eyes to light and how it is such an important part of our lives. We haven't talked about eyes and the sensors that and what we do with light, right? The next page is where the details, for those who want a little more detail, what I covered about the different. So page 22 is, there you go. Sorry, 21 is the different concepts. If you want more details of it, it goes into little paragraphs on each of the things we just talked about, right? Beyond the scope of this, we're going to press on, but I want to make sure if you're interested, you've got copies and you can go back and look at any of the concepts that you may not be familiar with. So let's take a quick look at the one-page summary, just a little more detail. And lamps in all cultures around the world, we're on page 22. They were able to, people realize that because the earth spins, turns, right, that half the day we face the sun and we've got daylight, half the day we don't and it's dark. How do we get light at night? And so page 22, Miss Allie, is talking about lamps and how lamps throughout cultures have burned oil, but it's a great example to talk about fire and how fire is taking the fuel that joins with oxygen and puts out heat and light. That's a concept that we talked about in space rockets. It's a concept that we have on the sun with fusion, and we can see it here with fuel that burns in lamps. Carbon, which is our life form, is based on carbon, but carbon is a key atom that changes from carbon dioxide as a gas that plants capture and trees capture, like in wood, and then carbon gets captured in coal, in different forms of fuels like oil, and that carbon locks up energy that we're able to burn with oxygen and give off heat and light. As a data point, in the Industrial Revolution, they made the steam engine, which used coal in England, and that gave off energy. But as part of that coal, they realized if they heated the coal, it gave off natural gas. And they could then go plumb that natural gas. And for a period of time, downtowns were lit by gaslight. And so and you had people would have to actually go and light. There were no light bulbs, no electricity at that point. They'd actually light the natural gas, and that's how public spaces were lit. Next, on page 24, we get into electricity. And once people realized electricity, and there's a lesson about how we as humans learned about electricity, frog legs, if you remember that. But people like Edison and Swan in England came up, Edison USA, Swan in England, came up with light bulbs, and were able to figure out how to get light that heated a filament, electricity that heated a filament that made light, and how that was the first light bulbs, but not the last. And we talked about the other kinds of light bulbs as well. But then we take a pause on page 25, and we say, people noticed that silver, the atoms of silver, were sensitive to light. And they could take a little bit of silver and put it on some glass, and it would make an image. But immediately that image would get lost. And so people were saying, look, we know that silver can capture light, but how do we fix it onto a plate? And there's a story told about a guy in France who was testing all this, and he didn't know it, but he did one of these shadowgrams, and he put it in a cupboard, and he pulled it out, and it was fixed onto the cupboard, but he didn't know why. And he had to go through the cupboard with all these different chemicals, and he finally found out there was a little bit of mercury from a broken thermometer that had helped fix it. And that's how they invented the first photography in black and white, one picture at a time. This is way before. And a lot of students are so amazed that we didn't just have video and have movies, color movies forever. You go back to the black and white pictures. So let's go to page 26, please. But it's fun to see students' faces when they realize that before smartphones, we had cameras, and the cameras had film, and the films were a chemical, and they had silver on it, and it was able to capture. But the first film pictures were just black and white. And we'll talk more about that when we talk about movies. But how we've gone from having film that had to get developed for pictures that you couldn't see until you sent it out and paid somebody to develop, to having the cameras that we hold in our hands and capture that picture. But it's the same basic process. Light bends in lenses captured on sensors. And digitally we have that file and we can see the pictures. And so students can understand why we have those. But it's not just enough to have the picture. On page 27, we see we need to be able to see the pictures. And so how awesome it is that we have screens, globe points, the pixels of light, of millions of pixels of light that are showing us these pictures, and how the files then have to capture all those points and put them back together in the right place to go from the very close-up points to the pictures that we see. I love the story about life. If you've ever seen any kind of bioluminescent, big word, life that makes light, this is in Puerto Rico, not far from the U.S., that where there's bacteria, and its bacteria can make its own light. But to the right is the person in Japan that was able to isolate the chemicals from the life that makes it and make glow sticks. And what happens in glow sticks, just like it happens in the animals that make light, is two chemicals, lucifers and anyway, two chemicals are in the glow stick. Before it glows, the two chemicals are separate. You break the glow stick and the two chemicals join, and that's what gives off light. And because it's so dark here in the US, Halloween, which is in the end of October, where a lot of the kids are dressed up in costumes, but a lot of them will have glow sticks to be able to help them from house to house to go get the candy. So I don't know how popular they are in Africa, but glow sticks are pretty popular, especially on Christmas. Life can make light. That is so amazing, right? The bugs like fireflies can make light. But even things like plants, like mushrooms, there are mushrooms that make light. And then we talked about the deep seas, like the octopus and the different types of forms of life that in the deep seas where sunlight doesn't penetrate, make their own light. But it's all based on chemicals that join together. And there's a good example of when the chemicals join together and give off light. It's an example of how in a light emitting device or diode, the electricity goes from a high energy state to a low energy state, and that's what gives off the light in LEDs. And it's the same basic concept that's happening with bioluminescence here in life light. So, but then we bring this home on page 30. We bring this home to the students, and right, and it's an opportunity to then come to a pixel of a smartphone. And then we look at our digital devices, and it's astonishing that we have in our hands such pictures of high resolution, each made from those points of light. We're going to press on. So we like to make sure everybody knows about the videos on page 31, that after we've talked about the ebooks and the books, you can take these pause moments and go and look at the videos, which then go and very quickly, most of them are usually about 5 minutes long, go and reiterate the presentation that we talked about. So I hope I'll take an opportunity to look at the lights. So we talk about movies and how the science that it takes to make movies move. Movies are made of moving pictures, and the first pictures were like 20 to 30 per second of single pictures is what makes a movie move. And now with our digital videos, it can be big numbers, but it's still individual pictures, lots of them, over 30 per second, that are moving, and the eye keeps together, and that's how we make our motion. So movies move because of single pictures. But let's talk about the science. And we got, of course, a one-page summary. Light is bent in lenses captured by cameras into pictures. We take a pause and look in the past of how the first pictures were black and white pictures, and then black and white movies that were silent, and how you had to have a piano player. When my father was young in the 1930s, it cost a nickel to go to the black and white movies, but they were in black and white. Right, and the first ones were silent, and then there was sound, but they were still black and white. They figured out how to use the process that light comes into a camera and captures a picture, but they also took sound and turned it into light, and then captured the wavelengths there on the side of the film, and they used the light to capture the sound. Then as more light, when you played it back in a projector, more light would shine on the picture to show the picture, but additional light would show on the little squiggles there, that then that light would turn into electricity to make the sound that was in sync with the picture. And what a huge accomplishment that was. But people didn't want just black and white movies and pictures. They wanted color. And the challenges then were, first, they came up with film that had 3 different layers. A layer sensitive to red light, green light, and blue light. And how those 3 layers then in a camera captured color, and how then it was displayed on screens. But now today we use digital chips that take the white light, just like the prism, turn it into RGB values for each pixel, and then that's what makes our colorful pictures today. So we've gone from sunlight to our digital pictures in 7 steps. Let's look at a little more detail of that, please. So this is an opportunity for you. If that was too fast at your own time, you can go back and look at the light, the lenses, the cameras, how black and white movies, then how the sound, right? We talked about sound in previous ones with the telephone, right? But then all this comes together in color movies and in digital videos and movies that we have on our smartphones and digital devices. But now we take a fun pause and we say, let's look at how we got here. Let's look at the centuries of science that went from mummies in ancient Egypt to our movies at the theater screens. And this, stay with me quickly. We're going to go through thousands of years of history here in just a couple minutes. But the ancient Egyptians made mummies as part of their culture. And to make a mummy, you need a salt called natron. And that salt helps dry out the body. And so traders would bring that salt from hundreds of miles away. We think it was Lebanon area, the Phoenicians. And some traders had stopped on a beach. They were taking natron salt from where they mined it down to Egypt to sell it. They stopped on a beach. They made a big fire. They used blocks of the natron to hold their cooking pots, clay cooking pots. And in the morning, there was glass, and they discovered glass. But once people discovered glass and learned how to make it and make it clear, then years later, we were able to grind the glass into lenses. And once we got to lenses, we could make cameras. And we talked in a previous time about how electricity was discovered. But now you've got the picture, you got to add the sound, right? And then we've got to have a light in a projector to project it back. And then we've got movies. So we've gone in a whirlwind tour from ancient chemical blocks that helped with mummies to movies. And it's most of the students have fun. It can be a little confusing the first times they see it, but it's kind of fun to go from mummies to movies. And then sometimes we watch the movie about a mummy, right? And so it's just a good tie-in. On page 35, there's more detail of what we just covered, going from glasses to lenses to cameras, electricity. And we can also add in radio waves. If you remember the different podcasts where we talked about the radio waves and how cell phones work because of radio waves, well, the pictures and the videos that we stream come via radio waves. So it's one more thing that we can add in, right? Then we talk about the lights in the movies. So mummies to movies with science.
Thank you, Doug. This is quite fascinating. Coming from mummies and the transition to where we are. I'm sure we have Magaga and some of our speakers that would like to ask or say something. You can unmute. Who wants to go first? Mr. Magaga, you ready?
Yes, ma'am. Magaga wants to go first. Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm so excited that you are all tuned in today. Douglas, that is quite an amazing pace. I'm trying to catch up, and it's wonderful to learn about light. And I think from the perspective from my perspective as an educator, I think light is a primary tool that we can use to perceive the world, right? Because we talked about, because what I'm seeing here is like we talk about the evolution of light and how important it is to understand the present items, the present nature in regards to the origin where it came from. And that fascinates me. And in the room among our speakers, allow me to mention that I figured this topic was going to be very quite interesting and of interest to so many people. And I think I have Felix Ouma, who will say, I think will have some time or contribution to this. Felix is a megatronics engineer. I met him in one of the conferences, and he was interesting, his perception about light and also in education. And that's really fascinating. And we have, oh my goodness, today I feel like I'm so much energetic. I have one of my students, Rebecca, who excites me and is so much interested in learning science. She is also training to be a teacher. And I think she's going to be a wonderful teacher because and that's one of the reasons why I think this is going to be an amazing platform, how to bring life to class and teach science. And I think these are amazing tools for her. And she reminds me of how much innovative teaching science can be in regards to thinking about the creative solutions of problems facing society and how science itself can lead to that. And it's amazing how we're learning about, light from the simple point of aspect moving forward. And it's not just Rebecca who joins today as my former student. I also have another former student, Brighton, who is also a teacher, a science teacher, and would also like so much to share and learn about these tools to make teaching awesome. I'm so glad Brighton is in the room. And I think we at any point when you feel like there is any contribution you have towards this, please feel free. This normally is not a one-man show. We are always here to interact, ask questions, contribute, and keep it going and shining. So please have the impression that you are welcome to join at any particular level. Just chime in and say something that is of that you think can lead us keep this fire burning. The idea is to spread and help learners globally to understand the basic science. You can see how so many things revolve around science. So it's a great tool for educators, engineers, any other person who is in this platform. There is something you can pick from here. And I think we also have Mary is a colleague teacher teaching science. So I think science teachers have so much, have shown so much interest to this. We are growing, and I think we are going to reach a point where we'll bring all of them to just share their takeaways in how this is working, and so much for that. Again, finally, I don't think this is finally, but Douglas, please keep up. This is amazing. This is the episode, I think the ninth. Is it the ninth or the sixth? Please correct me.
Ninth.
Yes, this is the ninth episode. And the thing is, if you've missed other episodes, there is somewhere we can get them. Miss Sally will give you that kind of information. And if you're asking what are the aims of these, what's happening here, the idea is one, to understand, to give a way in which learners can have the knowledge of basic science. Secondly, to equip educators on how best to make science lively and lovely. I think that is also the word, lovely and lively, and also to make students see the lucrative nature of education, not to be a boring space theory, things like that, but you want to be energetic and charming in the same time. And I think another goal here is to inspire any other stakeholder outside there to remind you of the role you can play to make sure that science keeps going in the most interesting and loving way. You can do that in so many ways by just spreading the word. Another way you can do that is by helping to ensure that the tools that our Douglas is showing us here, we have amazing books that they can reach students. So those are some of the objectives and many more. I'm trying to recap all of them in one so that at least you can feel like you're at home and that we need you here and we appreciate you being here. Yeah, thank you. So I think, Sally, if you think there is time, there is no me, maybe later on, you could also give each of the person to just share their reflections as we continue with the podcast. Thank you for now.
Mr. Magaga, thank you so much for your insights, your passion, your energy, and shining a light. And to have your students, and former ones and current ones, Ms. Rebecca, Ms. Mary, and Mr. Brighton. And we're so happy you are the ones that are able to take this and give it to the students, right? So everything that we do, all the work that we've done to this date, is to help you to engage, you and others to engage with students.
Thank you.
Light is an exciting subject. Are there any other questions before we press on, please?
Can I jump in a little bit?
Please.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. Douglas and Miss Kim, for really inviting me to join the booth. I'm really excited actually from Tanzania, Mwanza, to join this conversation. And well, Douglas, I want to thank you for bringing a very simple way to teach, light, sun to the sapiens. That was really simple. My name is Mahamba Sebastian. I teach in Tanzania. I'm a Fulbright alumni, 2019 in Montana. And I really came back and initiated one of the projects, which is called STEM program with ESL, English Second Language and STEM combined. It was one of the programs actually to combine science and social science on board, and we have been doing a lot of amazing activities. One of the things that you mentioned, I think, is a part of seeing the I mean, the fire. You talked of the photosynthesis. These are the things that we talk on the television, and our program actually got also it got the fund from the alumni engagement Fulbright Fund this 2023. And when you are mentioning those things, for example, you talk of the fire, and one of the activity my student did a couple of weeks was just to showcase like practical demonstration of invisible flame. These kids were using like things like very local things around. I mean, surrounding our local areas, like sanitizer, using the water and gas lighter, and they just showed how the invisible flame could appear in the laboratory, and they can use that to do a lot of stuff in the laboratory. But again, I love when you talked of the carbon. I also monitor. I mean, like I saw one of the activities on the carbon part. The kids showed amazing practical orientation part of using how to make the charcoal using the sugar and sulfuric acid combined, and they were just talking on how to kind of stop the use of the wood into charcoal. Rather, you can use the sugar and sulfuric acid to form the charcoal that you can use in domestic uses. So I see how you talk of the light and how it's really something that helps to our daily life. Thank you for bringing this on board. I'm really learning a lot. There are a lot of things I think I share later on, but I was just wanted to give a couple of things that we do, like in our ordinary life, with a student. But again, if we keep on learning as educators, I think you can keep supporting and enhancing the student that we have here in Tanzania, and I think all around the world. Thank you so much for bringing this on board. Back to you, Ms. Kim. Thank you.
Mr. Sebastian, thank you so much for your comments. That's fascinating how you make your own charcoal in an environmental friendly way. That's fascinating to bring to this, and tell your students good luck and well done.
I think, Sebastian, thank you for chiming in at that right time, because it just reminded me amazing how this can be practically applied to real life situations. Now, like I just mentioned, a point just came to me, and I'm so happy that one of the students that I taught is right here. And when you're talking about applying, this into solving community problems, I remember a group of students right here making solar oven. We were thinking about, we've been complaining a lot about drought, about extreme sun rays and sunshine, things not happening, and then the students came out and said, hey, but this sun can be energy, can be an alternative source of energy that can lead to solving problems like deforestation. And that is quite fascinating. They could just come up and make solar oven from locally available raw materials, and then use that, conduct community workshops in teaching Maasai women on how to use locally designed solar oven to actually as an alternative source of fuel. I think that was fascinating. That was really amazing. And at some point, Rebecca, if you feel like chiming in and sharing all that, that's amazing. Maybe in another one, but it's really awesome. And that reminds me that, yes, there is so much that we are gaining by breaking it down simple so that we can see ways of making it worthwhile and contributing towards the biggest world challenges. Anybody can make a difference. Thank you. I said, yeah, thank you.
Miss Sally, I don't know if there's anybody else who'd like to join us, or we'll press on. I know we just have 10 minutes left in this presentation, but thank you so much, Mr. McGog and Mr. Sebastian, for your comments. We're so happy that your students are here as well. To go from light to lunch, what a fantastic demonstration, right? To use your solar power and sustainable. Well done, sir. On page 37, and there's more detail than we're going to be able to get into in this podcast. We take, this is episode number 9. We have one more on artificial intelligence, but this is number 9. We take a pause and we say, science is enlightenment to our lives. It can bring solutions to the world's problems at a local level, right? We go through, there's another whirlwind trip here, but it's fascinating to go through the one-page summary. If you look at books and how we use books to capture knowledge, including ebooks, it goes back to, and this is going to be quick, so hold on, because I want to do this about 1 minute, and then we want to open it up for any other questions and discussions before we end this podcast. But hundreds of years ago, when we use sheep, right? And so we say ba, the noise that sheep to make woolen clothes, and then they learned how to make an animal fiber, right, from flax to make cloth called linen. So the Egyptians, back to the mummies tie-in, Egyptians wore linen cloths when they built the pyramids and when they made their mummies so that we could make our movies. But these linen cloths, and then hundreds of years ago in England, that you use the threads in looms, again, back on the analogy how the pieces become the product, then all this linen paper was around. So there was lots and lots of linen paper that they had. Then there was a plague that hit Europe, killed a lot of people. After that, they invented printing. And so they took the linen paper and with a printing press and the carbon in the ink, making it black onto the pages, and were able to make books. And for the first time in history, then people could make books, and we captured books, and we captured knowledge. And then we take that to the next step of how we do that digitally today. And we talk about how we use different processes to make the colored books. But it's so fun to go from bas, sheep, to books, but the point being knowledge and to capture enlightenment. So there's way more data there in the reference material than we're going to have time to get to in this presentation, but there's also a video for those that are interested. So we've got about 5 more minutes left. We'd like to open it up for any comments about what we've talked about. How do we make this practical? How do we excite students and young people about learning this knowledge so they can help improve their lives? Questions and comments, please. I know this can be a bit overwhelming. So if there's no comments, Ms. Sally, if we can go to page 40, we're going to hit a couple of subjects about stories. And then again, I want to make sure we've got anybody that has any comments. So I want to make sure you get your time on this. Your comments are much more important than anything I'm saying. So it's fun for us to integrate all this science that we're learning in a practical way for the classrooms. So the word phono means sound. So we talk about our phones and how they have sounds, and they also use photons of light to make the photos. So our phones use sound, phonos, and also photos of light. We bring that all together, and there's a history of how Edison first came up with capturing sound and the sound waves. And it was actually a cylinder with tinfoil on it. And he came up with a device to capture the sounds. And then he said, now that we've got the sounds and we're doing that for the ear, we need to do something for the eye. And so he came up with, there was a brief digression of a rich guy in California wanted to know if horses ever, their hoofs ever came off the ground. He wanted to know that because he was interested in racing. So they lined up all these cameras and they took lots of pictures, and they found out, yes, well, he had all these pictures in this sequence, and he took the pictures, 20 plus of them, 20, and then put them together. And he noticed that when you showed those pictures together, you could see motions. And that's where movie cameras came from. So it was fun to see how we have today our technology that we enjoy, that entertains and educates us because of questions that people ask in the past. And our job is to help students come up with the questions that they can answer with today's knowledge, but also apply in the future. Ms. Sally, let's take a pause and see if there's any other questions in our last 5 minutes, please.
Certainly, Mr. Magaga has a question or a comment. And I love your energy. And Sebastian too. And thank you. It's really awesome having you on board. And the students, Rebecca and Felix, how nice. So if Rebecca, it would be nice to hear your voice. Even if you just say hello, just unmute and join us. Just tell us something. Tell us if Mr. Magaga is the best teacher in the world.
Indeed, he is. Oh, how amazing to have joined this session. I've really loved it. And I relate all the information I'm getting to learn and how amazing these tools shall be and how they'll make my teachings as a teacher awesome. Yeah, I'll be really amazed to be joining all of your sessions and I can't wait to do that. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Which school are you teaching, or are you training to be a teacher, or you're already teaching?
I'm training to be a teacher at Kabarak University.
Awesome. So you're going to be a lecturer. Oh, you right now you're a student at Kabarak University, right?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. That's a very good university. And we have Felix. Felix, are you with us?
Yes, I'm
Yes.
still around.
Yeah. Say hello. Tell us about yourself. What did you learn
So,
today?
so I've really enjoyed the session, and yeah, I really appreciate the historical background that is integrated within the lessons. And
Mm.
a brief about me: I am Felix Ouma from Kenya.
Mhm.
I'm currently at Naivasha. I was invited by Mr. Magaga. We were together last weekend, and we are friends. I am a graduate of mechatronic engineering from Dedan Kimathi University of Technology, that is based in Kenya. I actually graduated this year, somewhere in April. And Magaga shared the link via his WhatsApp status. And so I saw the topic STEM, and it's something that I'm really interested in. So I DM'd him. I wanted to join the session, actually as an audience, and then he told me, actually, you can come and participate. Yeah, and I really thank him for that. Thank you very much for the lessons. I
Well
wish I had a
done.
teacher like Mr. Douglas while I was back in school in primary, actually. Yeah, his lessons are so awesome.
Mr. Douglas, I'm sure you have some feedback from that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Felix. Your generation is going to have so many challenges, and science can enable all of us to help you and the world to implement these. And so this is what it's all about, sir. You're a critical part of this. Thank you.
Thank you too, sir.
Ms. Sal, I think we're going to run out of time. Are there any last comments?
I'm sure Sebastian has and Mr. Magaga have something to say. So over to you.
Let me go first, then Magaga will join in.
Okay.
Well, there's one thing that actually you alluded, Mr. Douglas, on the part of light into food, and you just demonstrated on the sun, energy, and food. So I'm curious about the places where actually experience, like the sun maybe once per month or like 3 or 4 months. Do you want to tell me that maybe because of that scarcity, the place could be having some challenges with production of the food? I'm just curious. Or are the crops really adapting to the that kind of scarcity of the sun? What is your take on that? Thank you.
Excellent
And
question.
maybe before you react to that, I just want to add something related to Sebastian's question, right? I just read somewhere that light maintains our biology, our body clock. We are very active, and we're very active during the day, and but relaxed at night. Now that takes me to the question. Now, what about those places where they experience light at a very little amount of time? Are they all relaxed all the time? So,
Excellent questions. Let's take the food. So here in America, in the northern hemisphere, right? Most of the time in the summer it's sunny. So the time when we're growing our crops, it's sunny. So that's fortunate. In the wintertime, especially in the Northwest, in the Seattle area, it's very cloudy. It's like somebody pulled a blanket over us. And so it's bright, but there's not a lot of direct sunlight. And so that's the wintertime anyway. So the crops grow in the summer when there's lots of sun. Mr. Magaga, your comment about light, and so those of us who have traveled internationally, you get jet lag is for real, right? And a big part of the jet lag, of course, isn't just the time zone change; it's the light, and it's so important to once you've gone to a new place. For me, at least, I try to get some sunlight, and that's tough in England because England's like Seattle, right? But you at least get some brightness that helps your body clock reset itself. So very good questions and observations in the practical application of light. Miss Sally, can we fast forward to page 52? Just want to end with, there are a lot more topics on light, and there's a lot more source data that Miss Sally can help you with your students and your kids and just those who are interested about the different topics, right? But it's a broad spectrum of knowledge that we can bring to bear to our daily lives as we enjoy light. And so thank you so much, everyone. We had a lot of fun putting this together. We hope you enjoyed it. Please give us your comments. And then, as importantly, let's figure out how to share this with the younger generation. Let's get this to students.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Doug. Thank you to our listeners and our speakers as well. Please note this content is available for free as ebooks, and you can get videos as well. Then we appeal for donations, contributions, if you know of a donor who can support, so that we're able to print the books and send them to Mwanza, send them to Kisumu, and send them to Naivasha and to Mr. Magaga's Masai land. Wouldn't that be fantastic? So we're on a mission to ensure that these books can get to the marginalized communities. Currently, we've been doing quite a number of donations, especially past week with prize giving days for schools. And currently we have our staff in malls where they're doing reading sessions and donating some books to children. The festive mood is here. So let's join in. Thank you for your time. Please note this podcast happens every Saturday, 4 p.m. South Africa time, which East Africa time, that's your 5 p.m. And I think, Mr. Alford, that's your 7 a.m., right? Yes. So thank you, everyone. We appreciate you and have a pleasant weekend. See you next Saturday.
I have one saying to end the podcast with, and it reminds me of what is happening in case you don't know, northeastern Kenya, where there is starvation. So normally when we think about going there and sharing a tiny portion of food, and then one day in one of the community outreach, somebody asked, what is the best way to describe a tiny portion of food? And get what the answer was. It is just a small light. So a tiny portion of food is a small light. So you share a tiny portion of food, it's like you're sharing light and you're lightening the world. Thank you all.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
Bye.
Thank you. See you soon.
It was a pleasure to have everybody.